The world is on pace to have its first trillionaire within a decade. That's according to Oxfam International. Since 2020, the 5 richest men in the world have doubled their wealth, while the 3 richest, that's Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Larry Ellison, are 84% richer now than they were 4 years ago. So we decided to carry out a little thought experiment. Let's say that whoever becomes the world's first trillionaire is struck by a bolt of altruism and decides they're going to give away 99% of their fortune to help humanity. They leave themselves $1 billion to live on, and they put up $999 billion to tackle the world's problems. So what could we actually do with that money? Well, first of all, we offer the caveat that for a lot of problems, we just don't know how much it's going to cost to find a solution. But for some, well, that math has already been done. So let's start with world hunger. A study from the International Institute of Sustainable Development put the price tag for ending world hunger at $330 billion. That's in addition to buying meals for the 42 million starving people because of famine. The money in these plans goes towards creating sustainable food systems by laying foundations for sustainable agriculture, expanding access to food so that people experiencing poverty can actually feed themselves, and reducing food waste. So using that larger price tag of $330 billion, that would still leave us with $669 billion, lots of money to spend. So now, with the world fed, let's turn to disease. For many of the leading causes of death, there's heart disease, stroke, dementia. Money is not the entire answer. And for cancer, we just don't know. But for one major killer, a costed strategy already exists. Tuberculosis is the most deadly infectious disease in the world. In 2022, it claimed 1.3 million lives. According to the UN, investments of $250 billion could effectively end tuberculosis within 7 years. Now, that would be done through early detection and diagnosis of TB in the 50 million people it affects globally, the development of a new vaccine, and to keep TB efforts and resources on track. So let's say we spend that $250 billion, we save more than 1 million lives every year. That still leaves us with $419 billion. Now, malaria is another major killer. It claimed more than 600,000 lives in 2022. 95% of those cases were in Africa. So according to the Gates Foundation, it leads the fight against malaria across the continent. Eradicating the disease would cost between $90 and $120 billion. Malaria is treatable, so the majority of that investment would go towards diagnosis of the disease and getting the medicine used for treatment. The money would also go toward bed nets, preventative treatment in pregnant women, and indoor residual spraying. Again, let's budget for the high-end estimate of $120 billion. That still leaves us with $299 billion. So let's turn our lens to homelessness. For the vast majority of countries with the largest homeless populations, homelessness can be due to factors like systemic poverty or displacement. In fact, World Vision estimates it would take $350 billion per year beyond current investments to really address global poverty. But for some countries, like our own, solutions to homelessness can reasonably be mapped out and budgeted for. So let's do it. In 2014, a national study pegged the cost of ending homelessness in Canada at $44 billion over the next 10 years. You add in inflation, that comes out to roughly $56 billion. And that money would go towards a few things, like creating a federal provincial housing framework agreement, direct investments into affordable housing programs, housing benefits to help people acutely facing the challenges of unaffordability, and an affordable housing tax credit, plus investments in Indigenous housing, both on and off reserve. So with that $56 billion going towards ending homelessness in our country, that still leaves us with $243 billion to spend. Lots of money to go. So let's take a look at education. There are approximately 5.7 million students enrolled in Canadian secondary and elementary schools right across the country. We know the average tuition costs for one academic year at college or university is more than $6,800. So that means the average cost for 4 years of schooling is a little more than $27,000. So to send every single one of those 5.7 million kids to school for 4 years, on average, it would be about $156 billion. And even if we spent that, we still have $87 billion left in the budget. So while we're here, why don't we wipe out the $24 billion in current student debt that Canadians owe the government right now? That still leaves us with $63 billion to spend. Let's spend it. Having taken care of some major domestic needs, we're going to turn our focus back to the rest of the world. According to Water Wells for Africa, the cost to bring clean water to one person in Africa is $16. That's because a well costs $8,000 and it serves 500 people. With 1.2 billion people in Africa, bringing clean water to everyone would cost about $19 billion. So let's spend it. That still leaves us with $44 billion. Lots of money to go. According to the Wheelchair Foundation, 110 million people around the world need a wheelchair, and they don't have one. The large majority of them are in underdeveloped nations. So the foundation says it costs $125 to build and to ship a wheelchair. So to give a wheelchair to all 110 million people who need one, the cost would be about $14 billion. So everyone who needs a wheelchair now has one, and we still have $30 billion left. World Bank data shows that the 10 most impoverished countries have a combined external debt of $27 billion. So let's wipe that out. So to recap, we have now ended world hunger, we've eradicated tuberculosis and malaria, ended homelessness in Canada, paid for 4 years of post-secondary for every high school and elementary student in Canada, we wiped out student debt, we brought clean water to all of Africa, and we purchased wheelchairs for every single person in the world who needs one. Plus, we wiped out the debt of the 10 poorest nations in the world, and we still have $3 billion to spare. So as you can see, $1 trillion and some goodwill could go a long way. What we haven't accounted for is that it requires every dollar to be spent properly.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.